Welcome to this week's episode of the DNF1 podcast. This week we'll be discussing the fallout from the second and final test in Barcelona. We'll also be discussing who we think is going to be leading the pack going into the Australian Grand Prix and our predictions for 2020. We'll also be discussing the impact of the coronavirus. How will this impact the sport going on for this year? Hello there and welcome to the next instalment of the DNF1 podcast. I am your host Adam Burns and joining with me is once again Mr. Courtney Pine. Courtney, thank you very much for joining us on another episode. How are you this evening?
Very good. There's no getting rid of you, mate.
No, there certainly isn't, and there's certainly no getting rid of us as well. 3 episodes in a row and we're still going strong. I almost feel like singing about it, but...
Three episodes about getting cancelled.
I know. There's no stopping us now.
We're on the move. I had to get it in there.
No, it's like going, hey, no stopping us now.
We're on the move.
Yeah, we're not doing that again. Obviously, we're not built for singing. We are built for chatting rubbish on this podcast. So, as the intro has suggested, in this podcast, we're going to be talking about the second and final week as the teams were put through their paces for their final preparations before the Australian Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time. Courtney, did you manage to follow any of the second test?
Yeah, the cautious optimism I had from the first test. In terms of raw performance, that optimism has increased, but as I'm sure is heavily featured in your notepad there, there are slight gremlins of that Mercedes engine and I'm a little bit worried about it.
The pad is back. Yes, that's right. The pad is well and truly alive and it has been violated once again. Not as maliciously as last week, but still nonetheless, I am ready. I've got my notes.
Violated.
A little bit, yeah, but it's all,
Yeah.
all in good taste. So we're going to start off with your team, Mercedes.
My boys.
The cautious optimism. How are you feeling towards that now?
As I said, in terms of raw performance, quite happy, with the package that they've made. But the engine problems, not only with the Mercedes, but we saw problems with Williams as well, didn't we? So
yeah.
It's a tad concerning.
Absolutely right. And reliability has been the factor that Mercedes have had to focus on. Just running through the numbers, they did the most laps of anyone. So despite those reliability issues, the W11 was very well put through its paces. Did 903 laps. Lewis Hamilton in particular did the most laps, 466 of anyone in testing. So well done, Lewis. Still no more meat sweats.
There
He's
you
in
go.
good nick.
See the vegan diet.
I'm telling you, we've really got to get on that.
You wouldn't like me on a vegan diet, mate. Honestly, right? If I don't eat properly, I become a right bitch. Honestly, you wouldn't like me.
Do you turn green as well?
What? No. I would. I'll probably just go red because I do. I become a little bitch when I'm hungry.
Green giant.
Oh yeah, I like that. I'm very tall.
Yeah, no, very, very well. I mean, I'm fairly tall as well. But
you are.
Yeah, do all right.
I just edge you, don't I?
We do all right in that. I think that's the difference between guys who are like 6 foot and guys who are below 6 foot. It's like, how tall would you say you are, Courtney?
6'4".
6'4", yeah. So if you asked the guy that was below 6 feet, he'd say like 5'11" and 3/4.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Whereas me, I like to play it down a bit.
Yeah, as soon as you start with 6, you're all right. It's good. But yeah, so back onto racing.
Yep.
As this is a podcast about Formula 1. Valtteri Bottas, his time from the first test, the 1 minute 15.7, proved to be the fastest time. Valtteri also set the second fastest time. He set that on the final day, which was in the 116s as well, 116.196, which he set also on the C5 tyre.
I knew that.
And Lewis Hamilton was fifth fastest at 116.4. They do look the favourites, Mercedes, it must be said. Despite the reliability concerns, which we'll touch on in a bit, the car looks mighty quick.
Yeah.
It looks very much planted, especially in the final sector. I've noticed, by comparison to the Red Bull and the Ferrari, which we'll talk about in due course, the Red Bull does look pretty good as well, but there is that imbalance in terms of their setup, and perhaps there is a potential imbalance with the downforce that's been applied to the car, the balance between the front and the rear.
Seems a little bit rocky at times.
Well, it does, and there were quite a few spins for Verstappen and Albon, hence why I was suggesting perhaps there is an imbalance over the downforce, perhaps they're running too much front downforce on their setup.
It just dawned on me, you know that meme you sent me, the one where he looks like Patrick?
What, the
nose?
nose?
The nose. Do you reckon that's I can just imagine you putting that face when he's spinning. You have to put that on the up there, YouTube video.
Well, yeah, so for you lovely lot that watch this podcast on YouTube, this week I'm going to be putting in some images as we're going to be talking about specific upgrades.
Commitment to the cause, that's what it's called.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously we want you to listen in to us, which we will be doing this podcast. And that reminds me, actually, I probably should plug that. So just to go off a tangent a little bit here. So
we like doing that, don't we?
Oh, I think this more off tangent than on it. Literally wasted 5 minutes already, and we haven't really got anywhere with it. But yeah, so for those of you that are new to the podcast, you can watch this podcast on YouTube. Awesome. You can also listen to this podcast on your fave podcasting platforms. We are available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Alexa Tune In, iTunes, Heart Radio, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts as well.
We're everywhere.
We are here. We're there. We're everywhere. I'm not going to swear.
Yeah, I was worried then.
Yeah, we've got to keep it clean for the kids as best we can. So, and also you can follow us on Instagram, and we have a Twitter account as well. The Instagram handle is DNF1_podcast.
Yeah,
got it right this time. And the Twitter handle is also at DNF1_podcast.
Oh, well done. So you kept it simple like that.
Well, yeah, that way they can search on both platforms. But we are available on both of those. Please give us a follow on both of those, and we will be producing plenty of social media content for you guys to engage in.
I don't want to make this too much of a competition, but if you're running the Twitter, I'm running the Instagram. I'm going to be intrigued to see which one does better. I want to see.
You've got a head start because you've had an extra week, so you've already built up a bit of a... So I've got some catching up to do.
But I mean, in terms of general feedback on the content, that's what I mean.
Oh, I think you've got the better platform for that. I might have to raid a few hashtags in order to get people engaged, but we'll see what we can do. So yeah, back onto Mercedes. Yeah, they look very, very good over the first two tests. The main concern, of course, as you've mentioned already, Courtney, was the reliability factor. Yep. Over the course of testing, they used 3 engines, both of which that they were struggling with were for different issues. They weren't identical, and this is the same thing that happened with Williams as well. So Williams also used Mercedes power units as one of their customers, along with Racing Point.
Yep.
And Williams also had issues on 2 occasions with engine failures as well. Now, unfortunately for Mercedes, the difficult part with this is that these engine issues were not identical. So when they probably reviewed what happened with Valtteri's engine when he had the electrical fault during the first week, they may have had a solution to that.
Yeah.
But as a result of that, that may have opened up unexpected issues elsewhere. And as a result of that, that's going to create quite a head scratcher for the Mercedes crew.
Because Lewis Hamilton's was an oil pressure issue, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. He was doing a long run in the second stint, similar to what Ferrari was doing at the same time. Mercedes have really got to try and get on top of this, because this is very similar to an issue that they had back, obviously, in 2016 with Lewis. Obviously, he had plenty of issues that potentially cost him the World Championship.
Yeah, I'm not going there.
I didn't think you would. No. That's a bit of a sensitive time for you. Difficult time that was for you. And also in 2018, they had that double retirement. Was it 2018 in Austria? Or was it 2017?
Yeah, 2018.
It was 2018, because I think, that's right. They had the double retirement.
Yeah.
And Mercedes have said quite a lot that they were chasing performance throughout the test. And they were chasing the engine power as well. And
this was my concern, because I knew they were so far behind on engine power last season that they would be... It seems like they've caught up on engine power, but at what cost?
No, absolutely. And I think that Lewis Hamilton was asked about this himself, and he had to say this. So I'm just going to be reading a quote that I saw from Lewis Hamilton when he was interviewed on this. And he said,
like to thank the fans for coming along. You got the best fans.
Literally, I think I'll say this on there. I bet you a £5 if Lewis Hamilton wins the Australian Grand Prix, that is going to be the first answer to the first question he gets on the podium interview. I just want to thank everyone for coming out here. Blah blah blah. As he does, we love Lewis, but sometimes it is quite funny. It's almost become a meme, like almost as bad as Rosberg's Flames meme. So Lewis had this to say on the engine industry. He said, "It's become harder and harder for engine manufacturers to extract more performance from the power units." And then he was asked in reference to the engine dramas Mercedes received, or suffered, I should say, during testing. And he said, "It was a difficult winter last year, and it's been a difficult winter this year. There was a period of time with this V6 turbo where we were just gaining. But eventually, like with everything, you get to the point with limited returns. We are kind of in that peak top speed area now, where there is 1 kilometre here or 1 kilometre less over there." Lewis then went on to say, "The engine itself is actually very good, and it's definitely an improvement on last year, just not where they want to be reliability-wise." Now, that's quite telling because, as we just spoke about, Lewis Hamilton knows the significance of not having the reliability, despite having the fastest car.
Yeah.
It can be the difference between winning and losing a world championship. What won't help with that is Williams' problems that they've been having. Although they did quite a lot of running Williams in this second test, it must be said as well, but engine issues were a problem, and that's something that Mercedes will be keeping a close eye on. Having said that though, Racing Point, the other team that's been provided the engine power units from Mercedes, had no issues whatsoever.
That's encouraging.
Technical director Andy Green of Racing Point, he basically said that problems for the other Mercedes powered teams did not come out of the blue, meaning that they were aware of these issues and that there was a potential for them to flare up, which does breathe some encouragement to the situation because it does suggest to me that they have some measurements in place to try and counter this as the season goes on, and hopefully they'll be able to find a solution to that as early as they can. They tell us that they are not worried, so we are not worried either. We must stress that we don't know exactly what these measures are. We don't. That's all going to be...
We're not F1 engineers, are we?
No, and far from it. I don't think they'd let us loose with a nail gun, let alone a Formula 1 power unit.
Mate, I just about know the basics on a tractor, let alone a Formula 1 car.
We'll stick to the setups on the game. I think that's about as good as we get. But overall, this does imply that Mercedes, at the moment, are unable to run their engines at full power. And... does this mean that they have to run limited modes at the moment in order to counter these reliability concerns? And in the second test, I did hear whispers that Mercedes themselves were running down a little bit on the power that they were running in the first test. I don't know if that suggests that they were running quite a fairly decent amount of power on their engine in the first test by comparison, but if that is true in the second test that they had to run their engines at a lower engine mode, then that may give some opportunity and optimism to the likes of Red Bull, who, in my opinion, are Mercedes' closest challengers for this season.
Most likely.
And the engine efficiency and the engine power could be the telling factor between the two teams, and that will be music to Max Verstappen's ears in particular, because they know at Honda as well that as much as they've improved, they do, in my mind, need the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari to lower their performance a little bit, and to have issues in order to sort of compete with them on an engine front on a on a race by race basis, I should say. But overall, Mercedes look very impressive. Their long run pace looks very, very good. Their 1 lap pace, or ultimate pace, I would say, is probably a few tenths quicker than the Red Bull, and potentially at minimum as much as half a second quicker than the Ferrari. But Ferrari's the great unknown at the moment.
They
really
are. They are.
So we're going to move on to Red Bull now. As you hear me turning over the page on this one. So the number of laps that Red Bull did overall, they did 780 laps, which was 5th of everybody. Max Verstappen was the 6th highest on the lap count in the 400 club. He did 414 laps.
How many did Albon do?
The rest.
Great answer.
No, Albon did 366 laps, if my quick maths is on point this week.
I'm sure it is.
I'm sure it is, but of course those of you with a calculator,
I'm sure they're there. Listen, wait a minute.
Do you know what? You're just going to have to believe me on that one. I'm pretty sure 414 plus 366 is 780. Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm also studying to be an accountant as well, so I feel like I probably should know basic maths.
You might come back. You might go to an interview, right, in the future to be an accountant.
Oh, well, someone's going to call me out.
That time in your podcast, you got a simple question wrong there, mate.
One of the big 4 accounting firms are going to dismiss me over the fact that I got it wrong on a podcast, which I could have edited.
There you go.
See, this is it, guys. I don't do too much editing on this. Most of this is live, so you should be grateful. These are the sacrifices that we make for you. Or the fact
we like to give you an accurate representation of who we are.
Either that or I'm too lazy to edit.
No, we're going with the first one.
So yeah, so talking about Red Bull, Max Verstappen on the Friday set the second fastest time in testing. He was second fastest overall, even though he set the, I think it was the 3rd fastest time overall out of everybody, because Valtteri Bottas set the fastest 2 times.
Yeah.
1:16.269 on the Friday. He was doing some qualifying runs on this, so this is quite telling. We don't know, using the usual caveats, what fuel modes he was using or what engine modes he was using as well, I should say, and the fuel loads that he had in the car. But what was significant is that he was running on the C4 tyre, which For those of you that don't know, the C4 is the second softest compound that they use in testing, and Bottas was using the C5, which was the softest. The normal delta between the two sets of compounds is around half a second. So roughly translated, compared to Bottas's time in the first test, the 1:15.7, Max Verstappen is around half a tenth off of that, and he made a mistake in the final sector on that hot lap. Obviously, we don't know what Bottas was doing in the first test as well, but we would imagine the Mercedes was running at much better pace or efficiency wise than it was in the latter parts of the second test. So that does suggest that they are very, very close together in outright performance, the Mercedes and Red Bull. At face value, of course, there are the usual caveats in place, and there's only so much that you can get from testing.
We'll not know until Melbourne, will we?
So the RB16, as impressive as it looked very much planted most of the time. It didn't do too much in terms of the long runs, and when it did, it seemed that Mercedes and even Ferrari to some degree looked quicker in some regard. Again, the usual caveats apply here, so we can only take so much of this.
That's your term now, isn't it?
Yeah, but
It's gonna be.
Well, no, it's not just mine. I think it's just an easy way of saying things, easy way of describing circumstances that we are unaware of that can affect or change the overall picture, and we won't find that out until Melbourne. I mean, remember what happened last year?
I'm going to do a caviar drinking game.
Every time I say caveat, you take a drink. Oh boy, we are definitely making some inroads on this one. How do people listen to this? I don't know. But yeah, no, the car looked pretty good in times, very strong in the slow speed corners, sometimes as quick as the Mercedes. It may be some better, perhaps. I mean, it could prove to be a very close challenger to the Mercedes. But also, what was significant in this second test is Red Bull brought some new updates. So I'm just going to go through some of these now. I've also got the pictures to help me with these, and for the benefit of those of you watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see some of these pictures as well. That are provided by the sponsors for the esports league that I commentate on, Hot Lap Mode. You can follow them on Hot Lap Mode on Twitter and also Hot Lap Mode on Instagram. Now, these guys are fantastic. They provide great coverage, great analysis of the current topics surrounding Formula 1. A bit like we do. They're just a lot more professional than we are. We're just two guys that faff about. These guys are the real deal. So do check them out. Give them a follow on Twitter and Instagram. Really, really great guys. Do a lot of good things.
Nicely plugged.
Thank you very much. I expect my royalty check in the mail. So yeah, just to go on to Red Bull. So they had new front wing flaps. Now you can see just as the little yellow line is underneath there, it's mending the flaps a little bit. And also where the yellow arrows are on this. I'm just showing Courtney the pics as well. You've got the old picture at the top and the new one at the bottom. There's going to be a theme on some of these images.
So where are the young flaps and where are the old flaps?
You can see the old flaps have all changed and they sort of curve a little bit as well.
Right.
Now what those are meant to do is they're meant to favour what we call the upwash effect. Now the upwash effect is basically a way of describing how airflow gets channeled to move it up. And then it goes over the front part of that wing, and then it then comes down, creating a downwash effect and some lift as well on the car, which should improve performance in a straight line when it makes contact with the air, and obviously make it faster in the corners, much more efficient airflow, more consistent, so the drivers can have more confidence and stability with the car. So moving on to the next image, we have the new barge boards. Now these seem to copy some of the ideas on the SF1000, the Ferrari. You can also see the bottom image, the connected double boomerang at the bottom.
Oh yeah.
And there are also, in the bottom square, in the bottom image, you can see something that looks like a razor blade grill. These are airflow diverters, and they look like razor blades, as I've just mentioned. They look very similar to the side pods diverters that are on the Mercedes W11. So for those of you eagle-eyed, you'll see the Mercedes and you'll also see the Red Bull showing these diverters. So a nice few little bits on the Red Bull there. I must say there's a lot of work gone, and this looks more like their spec for Australia.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a B car. I don't think anyone's brought a B car to this test. But overall, the Red Bull team, they seem very, very happy. They're quite buoyant about their prospects for the season. Max Verstappen certainly seemed relaxed about their prospects. Now, to see a driver like Max seem quite relaxed and quite chirpy and in a good mood suggests to me that he knows that he's got a good car underneath him. And Red Bull have been singing the praises about this car. With Red Bull, Courtney, where do you feel that they are in comparison to Mercedes? Do you feel that they are perhaps on par with them, or at least close enough to them that they're going to be more than just an occasional thorn in their side?
I think it's going to be very close. I mean, I think qualifying it'll probably be Mercedes ahead of Red Bull. But I feel it's going to be like that traditional kind of how it was a couple of years ago where Mercedes were fastest in qualifying but then they'd come across trouble in race pace. So that's where I expect it to be at the start of the season.
No, I completely agree. Having said that, there were some issues with the new bits. It did seem that particularly in the second week, Max and Alex Albon were having some issues with some spins at high speed, having a few tank slapper moments. Now, for those of you that don't know what we mean by the term tank slapper, it's when you sort of come into a corner and you turn in and the rear of the car doesn't quite stabilise and it comes loose. And as a result, it ends up losing control and spinning around. So sort of almost like the rear of the car overtakes you at the front as you're going sideways, and then it sends you off. So yeah, it had a bit of a tank stepper moment. Alex Albon had a few of those. Now, Max put those down to pushing the limits. I'm wondering perhaps if there are some issues with these newer bits, or perhaps there's an imbalance with the downforce ratio between the front and the rear. Normally, in Formula One, what teams like to do, or what the preferred setup is that the front of the car, or the front wing, I should say, has less downforce than the rear. Obviously, with the cars run quite a lot of rate, especially the Red Bull, you want the emphasis to focus more on the rear wing. And sometimes if you have an imbalance where there's too much front downforce, you end up in a situation where the car can oversteer or become loose, or you end up with a tank slapper moment like what the Red Bulls did. And then on the flip side to that, you can have an imbalance where there's too much rear downforce and then the car's very understeery. Even though it's stable at the rear end, halfway through a corner, the car just might veer off out away from the apex, and then you're complaining you've got too much understeer. So that's Red Bull. I think we're going to move on from Red Bull now, and I think we're going to talk about the other team that could challenge for the championship, and that's Ferrari. Now, interesting one on Ferrari. As we said in the first test, we weren't sure with their pace, where they were. You felt that Ferrari were hiding a lot of their pace and that they could be doing what Mercedes did last year. I felt that perhaps, yes, there's more to come from them, but overall it did seem a bit underwhelming considering what perhaps we might have expected from them.
Could they still be playing it down now?
Well, this is the great unknown. I think Ferrari of everyone is the great unknown this season for a lot of reasons. But in terms of running and reliability, massive improvement from last week. They ended up doing overall 844 laps. Now, considering that they were very far down the running order last week, they ended up doing the second most laps of anybody. So only Mercedes had done more laps. Yeah. And that was in part mostly to the efforts of Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc did 442 laps overall. Now, on day, I think it was day 3 it might have been, or day 2 of the second test, he did a mega 181 laps in one day. If I'm right, that's a record, I believe, because Nico Rosberg did, I think, 170 odd in 2016, I believe, and Charles ended up doing more laps than that. So that's a mega effort from him. And I'm sure you'll be... we'll say is Rosberg's testing career over. I think we'll put that meme in there. But yeah,
it'll be like a brief.
Yeah. So, in terms of pace, Charles actually was 4th fastest overall, 116.3, and Sebastian Vettel was 9th, 116.8. As I said, big improvement on the mileage from Ferrari. Only Mercedes did more laps. It seems to be more reliable than it was last week. Of course, they had the issue where Vettel had some issues with the engine. It looked a lot better in the second week in terms of reliability. And that's something that Ferrari have admitted that they have focused a lot of work on over the winter, is the reliability of their engine. And it has something that has cost them last season.
Not massively, though.
No, but enough where perhaps it was a concern. Maybe they weren't able to run at the performance they wanted to. I'm not sure. Yeah. As I said, a lot of reliability running, and obviously the significance of the Ferrari engine controversy, that's something we're going to be talking about in due course later on in this episode. So yes, the reliability is probably one of the best parts about it. But they brought new parts to this second test. As we mentioned in the last episode, Ferrari brought a new modified floor, which you can see there. There's some sort of inlets where the arrows are. At the back, they've modified, I should say, the floor, which should improve downforce and aero efficiency in that area. They've also brought a new rear wing. Now, the original rear wing, as you can see in the top image, as I'm just showing Courtney and showing you guys now, it's very, very straight. Now, the Ferrari drivers have complained that one issue with this car compared to last year is it's a lot more draggy, almost too much. Ferrari have been focusing on trying to get much, much more downforce on this car. And as a result, the more downforce you apply on this car, you end up with more drag.
It's all a balancing act, isn't it?
It's a balancing act. Last year they went for a low drag car, which didn't really work for them. It worked in some areas, but it didn't work for them over the course of the season, and they found the car wasn't good enough in the corners compared to the Red Bull and the Mercedes, despite their pace advantage with the engine. As you can see in the bottom image, it's more of a spooned, curved rear wing. Now this is a trial, but I believe this may be the concept they go for in Australia, and this is to reduce the drag. So it splits the airflow over that, and it should have a less draggy effect, which is important on the rear wing, because the rear wing is one of the parts that has where the most drag is affected. So to try and mitigate that as much as possible will really help them out in this regard. Also, another thing, the new engine hood that Ferrari was testing in this test. Now, Ferrari did a lot of work, as they mentioned on the launch of their car, at the rear of the car, to improve downforce. That was one of their main focuses. However, they also wanted to improve the cooling. Now, the engine hood at the top that they used in the first test, I'm not suggesting they're not going to be using that going forward. They will probably at some races where cooling is not as necessary as others, but it's a very tight package at the rear at Ferrari. They've done a lot of work on their tight rear end. And
I've done the joke once.
We'll roll with that one. But as you can see on the bottom, there's a lot more room in there, a lot more air to cool the engine from behind, and that looks like the version they're going to be running in Australia. So a lot of work from Ferrari. As you can see, it's all like coloured in green. That's where the focus is, for those of you that are familiar with where the cooling comes from and where it goes out. As I said, it's meant to be expected in Melbourne. That's what they're going to be running to cater for this tighter rear end that they have. Now, about the pace of the Ferrari now that we've gone through the development bits, they do look good on the long runs. But again, the usual caveats at play. As Courtney takes a swig of his beer that we're going to be talking about later. Yeah, it does look good on the long runs. They look pretty good in between Red Bull, Mercedes. However, the front of the car is still having a problem. They're still not quite able to generate as much front downforce. Now, it does bite into the corners on entry, the Ferrari. Their issue is on exit, and both of the drivers have complained, particularly in the final sector. I noticed that the drivers going into the corner are quick. When they come out on the exit and when they put the throttle on, that's where the problems happen. Sort of middle of the corner.
Is there a bit of wheel spin going on?
It's more understeer. Sorry, I should say. So there's a lot of understeer going on that car on the exit corners, and especially on a track like Spain, where aero inefficiencies are more found out than at other tracks. You've got that long run into turn one.
I was going to say, though, if you're struggling to get speed into going onto a long straight, you're in a lot of trouble, aren't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, both drivers have said overall that the car does feel stronger in the corners than the predecessor, the SF90, but it is now lacking on the straights as a result of the downforce. Now, we don't know how much in part that is to the engine being turned down, and in some cases, compared to the Alfa Romeo, who runs Ferrari engines as well, it was almost as much as 30 kilometres down on the straights, according to some of the GPS data, which is quite shocking.
Bizarre.
But that is a lot of lap time. Obviously, I wasn't able to do the numbers on it. If I had time, I would have tried to have a geeky moment and see how much that would have affected them time-wise. And I know you're looking at me as like, oh, I bet you really wanted to. I really did.
I'm really disappointed in you, Adam. You should have done it. I don't understand why you didn't look into every single little detail.
Well, unfortunately, I had an accounting exam to study for
Not
over
really
the
an
weekend.
excuse, really, is it? You need to put your career aside for a fact for this podcast.
I don't think we're quite at that point yet. I'm trying to sort of balance both of them at the moment.
Yeah, that's because of your attitude, that's why.
Oh, right, okay.
Can you not see how much work I'm putting in, all the prep I'm putting into these episodes, Adam? Can you not see it right in front of me?
Yeah, where is it?
What? I left it at home.
No, you left it at home. Oh, right. Yeah, I only lived down the road. For those who are unaware, it took Courtney, what was it, a month to set up an Instagram account?
I think it's a bit harsh. About 3 weeks.
3 weeks. All right, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, 3 weeks. And I think the funny thing with Ferrari, as we're going back to them, is I'm a bit confused about where they are in terms of trying to convince us about the performance of this car. Now, they're trying to play this down. I don't know if this is a ploy that they're trying to play down the performance like Mercedes often do. I mean, this is straight out of the PR book for Mercedes. They're always saying that their rivals are faster and that they're the ones got catching up. And then they turn up to race day and absolutely smash it.
Because it makes sense to go that approach. Because remember, you know what? You know we have the drinking game about the word that you use. We should have one about every time I say about Ferrari being a national institution. Because last season, that's where I feel they went wrong. Because there was all this hype, and they put themselves under so much pressure already. It's all about pressure and how you handle it. So that's why I feel they're taking a different approach this season.
Well, this is my thoughts on this as well, because I don't understand why Ferrari are why they would be playing the performance of their car down so much if they were bluffing and they knew that they were so much faster. And we did see them turn up the wick a little bit. I mean, Sebastian Vettel was fastest on day 5, even though Mercedes had trouble. But at the same time, it doesn't make sense, because the Italian media will take this and they'll completely destroy them. They'll literally publish stories saying they're not capable, hounding characters out in the team, senior personnel. There's just no win for Ferrari, or there's no reason for them to go out and say if this was not true.
Do you mind if I go off on a quick tangent? Because I have a question.
Why not? We've done that since we started.
Do you feel, sorry to non-F1 fans before I say this question, do you feel that Ferrari have the same problems than the England football team do when it comes to pressure from the media?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think not necessarily in recent times, given the success, if you want to call it that, of the England team in recent years, relatively speaking, I suppose. I mean, they haven't won anything, but it's been better since the World Cup when we got to the semi-finals. Yeah, I can understand why back in the golden generation times when we had players like David Beckham, Lampard, Gerrard, Scholes, Ferdinand, all those characters. Yeah, Joe Cole. Yes, half that team was formerly West Ham. And the pressure that the media put on that side to deliver, because they were expected to win and deliver a major international trophy, and they never did, not even close.
No.
And we have our own theories on that, but that'll be a debate for another time why that is, perhaps on a different kind of podcast. The F1 fans around the world probably not interested. But I totally see the comparison to Ferrari.
This is what I'm saying.
And I don't see why they would do it. I mean, and also, I'm also a bit confused about Mattia Binotto's play on this, because he's gone out and said, look, this is the performance of our car, we're not holding back, we've had some issues with the engine, we've been chasing reliability, we've been looking for downforce, we've just created drag, this is stuff we need to look at, and our car is not quite where we want it to be. Then, later on in the testing, he went out to say, no one's really showing their full hand, so we don't really know what the order is. We can't take the testing results and put together the pecking order for Melbourne.
That is a fair point.
Which is what we're going to try to do later on, and what everyone else does.
But not can't do it, but we can.
Exactly, yeah. This is it. We waited a year to make sure our credibility. We knew something was up when Ferrari were fastest last year. We thought, hang on a second, that's not quite right. That's not the normal playbook. And then luckily for you, not me as a Ferrari fan, that got proven right. And so everyone else's credibility was destroyed, and we're the only ones you can trust. So
that's it. There you go.
That's it. I think we can end the episode here. I think that's the only thing I think we can do. Yeah.
Bravo to us.
Excellent episode. Same time next week.
There you go.
Brilliant. Okay, so yeah, Ferrari, I honestly don't know. And I think we'll get onto this point actually with the engine stuff. So
please do. I've been waiting for this.
So before we go into the second part, I feel like we do need to discuss this. So for those of you that don't know, around 15 minutes before the checker flag wave to end the
12
final.
12 minutes actually.
Was it 12?
12 minutes.
12. I was giving I like to round. I like rounded figures.
12 whole minutes.
12 minutes. How many seconds is that, Courtney? Go on, quick maths.
60 times 12 would be 72?
Add another couple of zeros. And that is why Courtney's not an accountant and I am.
Go on then, go on.
I like
it.
So as Courtney mentioned quite rightly, 12 minutes before the end of the final test session, the FIA released a press statement. Now, did you see what they had released, Courtney?
I know it word for word.
You know it word for word. Would you like to recite it, or would you like me to have a go?
Choo.
They say the FIA announces that after thorough technical investigations, it has concluded its analysis of the operation of the Scuderia Ferrari Formula 1 power unit and reached a settlement with the team. The specifics of the agreement will remain between the parties. The FIA and Scuderia Ferrari have agreed to a number of technical commitments that will improve the monitoring of all Formula One power units for forthcoming championship seasons, as well as assist the FIA in other regulatory duties in Formula One and in its research activities on carbon emissions and sustainable fuels. Now, that's huge. I don't know about you. For those of you that are unfamiliar with where this has originated from, last season, not long after the summer break, I think it was around the Russian Grand Prix, towards the end of the season, there was rumours going around the paddock about the legitimacy and legality of Ferrari's engine in terms of using lubricants, cooling lubricants and oil burning to get a power boost and improve performance. The Ferrari was very well known last year, as well as having a low drag concept, for having about half a second almost on some tracks advantage.
They were well out of the way
on the straights,
weren't they? Yeah.
And this coincided with having very impressive one-lap pace rather than in the race, where they could run these special like party mode.
They would, because they'd be behind, wouldn't they? And even up to Q2, they'd be behind in Q2, and then come Q3, they'd just have a lap out of nowhere.
Absolutely, yeah. And there was a growing belief that there was some kind of wrongdoing from Ferrari, not necessarily deliberately breaking the rules, but it almost seemed like Ferrari had found a loophole within the regulations to be able to do what they were doing for this extra engine performance, if of course that is the case. And we're not suggesting there's any wrongdoing at the moment, because that's not been proven,
or at least that's not been denied.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where it gets a bit difficult, because as you just said, Courtney, the statement itself implies, first of all, that we cannot confirm or deny that there was wrongdoing from Ferrari. Even though people may feel the way they feel about this, that becomes an issue for some of the other teams, because now there's going to be an extra sensor that's going to be untraceable from the other teams on these engines to try and improve policing these regulations to the other teams. So there is perhaps a chance that other teams are doing this as well. And there are ways about it that they may be doing it differently from Ferrari to suggest they might be getting the performance. We don't know that, and we're not implying that that's what other teams are doing or why they're annoyed about this. But what it also means is that, considering how well documented this incident was and how much of an investigation had taken place, and the fact that it's just been, for lack of a better phrase, put to one side, enough money and resources have been allocated to this, it's almost come back inconclusive perhaps. The other teams are going to... there's no closure on the matter.
It depends what happens in Melbourne, doesn't it? If it happens again, then it's all going to kick off from the other teams again, isn't it?
Possibly, but I'd just be very surprised if the other teams do not... I'd be surprised if the other teams actually take this lying down and not actually respond to this, because this is quite a big deal. And in a way, if the result of the findings the FIA made with Ferrari suggested that there was wrongdoing, or that there wasn't wrongdoing, perhaps we should say, the other teams may try to, put certain...
adopt it
to their own engine concepts and maybe improve performance. So this is something that I don't believe is going to go away. As a fan, I'm a bit annoyed because I feel like I want closure on this. I want to know if Ferrari once and for all were doing wrong, or were breaking the rules, or were manipulating the rules to a degree that isn't really in the best interest of the sport, or perhaps it was legal. We don't know that. Only Ferrari and the FIA know the truth. I had heard rumours about a settlement being agreed between the two over the fact that Ferrari had put a case forward that they weren't doing anything wrong, and that they had all this evidence to suggest everything they were doing was legal and within the ruling. And the FIA, on a counter argument, had this belief that there was wrongdoing from the Ferrari in this regard, but they weren't able to trace it or prove otherwise. They just had that suspicion. And also how this all came about, because it just come out of nowhere. It wasn't other teams. I thought
it was settled last season.
Yeah, in a way it was, and it also, when this happened, it also coincided with Ferrari having a deficit in performance around about the American race, the US Grand Prix.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
But Ferrari were also running a lot more higher downforce pieces on their car, which increased the drag, and obviously would mean that they've got a poorer straight line speed as a result. So we'll be keeping an eye on that and seeing what develops over the course of the season. But it's definitely something that I hope doesn't go away, and it's definitely a huge talking point at the start of the season. And it could have implications on Ferrari's performance, because
this makes me wonder. This what ties, goes back to where you start with Ferrari. Could this be one of the factors which is affecting our lack of knowledge of where Ferrari are right now.
Perhaps, but it also has the potential to suggest that what Mattia Binotto was alluding to is that their pace is perhaps true. That perhaps that the reason why they're down on the straights, as well as having the increased amount of downforce and obviously drag as a result of that, the engine performance may not be there to counter that. The Ferrari may be running a fairly good engine mode on their car, but not able to extract the performance out of it that they have with the old engine in this way, because
it would explain the dramatic change in concept, wouldn't it?
I mean, if you cast your minds back, for those of you that have seen Rush will probably remember this as well, the film about this story between Niki Lauda and James Hunt, and the McLaren was penalised for having a car that did not comply with the ruling by the smallest of margins. It didn't have any effect on performance, but it was still illegal by the rules. And Ferrari protested this, and the McLaren had to rebuild their entire chassis and their bodywork on the car to comply with the rules, and they lost so much performance. And it only got to halfway through the season where they actually managed to catch up. And in a way, there is a potential Ferrari could be in this boat now, where they've had to sort of rebuild their engine to a degree, but they've lost so much performance.
Yeah.
So that is a concern. But we won't know until Australia what the real pecking order is.
It's intriguing.
I think that's a good way to end this first part. So we're going to take a quick break. Go get yourself a hot drink,
and
relax,
a Corona.
And if it's driven you to that so far, why not go for something stronger if you like? And we'll join you for part 2 of the DNF1 podcast, where we will be discussing the other teams, what our thoughts are on the pecking order for the season, and obviously the impact of the coronavirus on the sport. So do join us after the break. So welcome back for the second part of the DNF1 podcast. We hope you are all doing well, and if you're tuning into us after a little bit of a delay, where have you been?
Yeah.
We've been hanging around waiting for you.
Welcome back, you lovely lot.
We've been waiting for you. Why'd you leave us hanging? Okay, so we've talked about the top 3 teams, and I think just to recap on that briefly, do we feel that the advantage the top 3 have is going to be... Do we feel like it's been retained? Do we feel that there's going to be anyone from the midfield perhaps trying to challenge them?
I mean, you never know with that Racing Point. Hey, Adam?
No, I think actually a good point to go on Racing Point. So the Racing Point, otherwise known as the Pink Mercedes, the 2020 version of the W10, or my personal favourite, as I've been hearing, Tracing Point.
Hey.
But very good. So the Racing Point team, probably the biggest winners of testing, I have to say. They looked absolutely bulletproof. They didn't have any issues. They were fast right out the box.
Yeah, they will be with that concept.
Absolutely. And very famous, as we mentioned in the last episode, they've basically taken the concept of the W10 quite self-admittedly. Not necessarily copied it, but there's a lot of similarity to it, especially at the front. But they've taken that concept and kind of made it their own a little bit. So there are some subtle differences. But in large, it does look like a pink Mercedes, to be fair. Although I like a pink Mercedes, it looks kind of cool.
There you go. There aren't enough pink Mercedes on the roads, are there?
The Lady P of Mercedes. There we go. Very nice. They did 782 laps in testing. It was the 4th most, which is kind of fitting, considering that's where we probably feel that they were going to be at the moment. Sergio Perez did 441 laps, which was, guess it was 4th overall of all the drivers. Their fastest laps, Sergio Perez was 7th fastest, 116.6. Lance Stroll 16th fastest, 117.1. So the car does look quick. And Racing Point themselves probably didn't buy into this at first after the first week, but as the second week went on, there are some growing ambitions in that team that there could be a possibility that they have Ferrari in their sights. The mighty Ferrari. I don't believe that they are right on their heels or snapping up at this point.
That would be such an embarrassment for Ferrari.
It really would, and it would be such a coup for Racing Point. And we want to see the midfield teams closing up to the top 3,
particularly going into 2021.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I also read earlier that Ferrari, if it doesn't work out for them early on in the season, they may switch their entire focus to the 2021 car. And I can understand why they may decide to go down there. I mean, it might be early to say, but with the regulation change as huge as it's going to be, and Ferrari is one of those teams that has the ability to divert resources between 2 projects at the same time. like this, especially on this magnitude, it may benefit them to do that.
Going into 2021, yeah.
But it's too early to say at this point. I mean, we haven't
yet.
Exactly, we haven't even had a wheel turn yet. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. But yeah, as I said, there were some subtle differences to the Merc W10, but the car looks pretty good, looks pretty planted. Sergio Perez went out openly and said this is easily the greatest car he's ever driven. Not surprising considering how fast these cars are. A lot of drivers in the paddock probably feel that way about their current cars. So yeah, the a lot of optimism. Technical director Andrew Green, very optimistic. Otmar Schaffner as well. Couldn't stop singing the praises of this car. And they have taken this concept and kind of made it their own. It's not a complete carbon copy. And it is within the rules. So we're not suggesting that what they're doing is malpractice or against the rules.
I'm surprised it hasn't been done more often.
Well, Haas did something similar in 2018 when they had a very similar car to the, I think, SF71 or SS70 in 2018. They ran a 2017 Ferrari, very similar, as part of their partnership with Ferrari, the technical arrangement. And Racing Point, or they were Force India, were one of the teams very, very much vocal against this kind of behaviour. But they've done it themselves now, so cast whatever irony you want to that.
They probably thought, you know what, if they're going to do it, then why?
I'm surprised more teams don't. And given that the rules are only consistent for one more year, and we're going to go completely different regulations from next year, it does make sense for a team as small as Racing Point are at the moment, and the budgets that they have respective to the big three, and perhaps Renault as well to some degree, as a works team. It makes sense to go with a concept that works. It's more cost effective, and you can develop it in your own way. And the deficit to Mercedes from Racing Point is around about 9/10 to a second, I would say, on ultimate pace. But that's about right where the W10 was probably last year compared to the W11. So I think Racing Point, they're going to have a very good season and look like the team most likely to challenge the top three. And I say top three, probably early on in the season, threaten Ferrari, and we'll see how that works. Depending on what Ferrari choose to do with this car versus next year's car, it could be a regular feature. Seeing them two battle it out would be great to see.
I want to see that McLaren up there though.
Yeah, I think we'll move on to McLaren actually, because they were the next team I was going to cover. As I almost dropped my pad. Not the pad.
I think that it's got. I know F1 isn't about the show, but I think they've got the most entertaining driver partnership, haven't they?
So McLaren did 802 laps. That was third overall. Good effort from them. Carlos Sainz did a massive 446 laps. Only Lewis Hamilton did more. The pace of the car looks good. Carlos Sainz was 8th fastest, 116.8. Lando Norris 20th. Not really representative, 117.5, but bear in mind he did set that on the C2 tyre. When you adjust that for tyre compounds and perhaps potential fuel loads and stuff, it is very close to the Racing Point performance. And when he was doing a long run, he'd actually caught and passed Antonio Giovinazzi on that race run as well, which you don't see often in testing, overtakes, but he did that. Looking at some of the technical changes, McLaren have brought new front wing for both Norris and Sainz that they did. There's a new M-plate, foot and upper flaps, which were redesigned on the MCL 35, as you can see on the image pointed out by the arrows, to sort of improve the airflow efficiency on there, which looks very nice, much smoother, much more consistent, so that should help with front downforce. McLaren seem also very optimistic about performance. I reckon they're going to be battling with Racing Point, and they're, like them, probably around a second off the Mercedes ultimate pace. I should mention as well, there was a new floor redesign for Mercedes as well. Now, what you can see here, the Flowfizz paint between the two. You've got the older spec at the top that they were running and the newer one at the bottom. Now, really what you want with the airflow on this...
You've got some good images there, right?
Yeah, thank you. So they arrived the first week with the picture at the top, the old spec. Now, focus on the purple highlighted bit on the pictures. Now, this is where you want the airflow to be going. Now, what we mean by Flowfizz is luminous sort of dust paint. You mix in with a paraffin element and you apply it to the car so that it dries when the airflow is sort of being channeled through over the laps. It doesn't drip everywhere and your car just looks like a massive Picasso piece, or like, you know, all over the place. And what this does is it gives you an idea of the surface flow, because at the rear of the car you don't really get paint coming off in the right area and it settles somewhere else. You don't really want that to happen. So looking at the lines on the left, sort of like the outer vertical wall, the lines are heading towards into the low pressure area behind the tyre, which is highlighted by the purple shades, and that's what you really want to try to achieve. And you can see that it's more apparent on the second image at the bottom, which is the newer one, and that's really what you want to improve that rear downforce. Now,
it's definitely a big step upwards, isn't it?
Yeah, and I was talking about improving downforce overall. Now, believe it or not, the top image will most likely get you more consistent downforce, or perhaps better downforce over the one lap. That's what you want overall performance. But the bottom one is more consistent, it's more stable, and that will give the drivers more confidence. So it's not to suggest that the bottom image will be the one, the new floor that they'll use will be the one that they'll run all the time.
They've got options.
They've got options, and I imagine that it might be more consistent, as I mentioned, it give the drivers more confidence, and it'll probably be the option they may prefer to go with. But time will tell, but it looks impressive from McLaren. They look like they've done a lot of good work in that area.
Encouraging.
And hopefully they'll go. I mean, Andrew Seddle has said he's very happy with the programme they ran. They've been a bit under the radar, but McLaren look pretty quick, and I'm expecting them to challenge with Racing Point for this season in the midfield battle. So that brings us on to Renault. Renault had the 7th most laps. It was 743 in total. Daniel Ricciardo set the 3rd fastest time.
Daniel Ricciardo.
116.2 as well. Esteban Ocon was 6th fastest at 116.4. The Renault pace on the surface of it, or face value, would look pretty quick. However, I'm a bit concerned about Renault. I really do worry. I did talk about them last week, saying they look like they might have potential to do well, coming off the back of a difficult 2019 where the car didn't really work.
No.
But I will say that it seems more likely to start with that they're going to be battling with AlphaTauri for 6th than the likes of Racing Point and McLaren. I think at the moment those guys seem to have done a better job on their cars, and for a team that has the power and the budget of someone like Renault, a works team in some regard, it's a bit disappointing because these guys should probably be challenging with the big three, but they're just not.
And particularly 2 drivers they've got as well, that'd be quite underwhelming, won't it?
Yeah, and they've got 2 very good young drivers for different reasons. Obviously, want to be performing really, really well. And I don't know about this car. One thing that strikes me that gives me more worry about the Renault is the fact that throughout last season they got rid of a few key personnel that obviously was part of the failed project in 2019. But given how far in advance you have to develop these cars, these guys would have been involved with signing off the parts that were on the design concepts that were applied to the 2020 car.
Very good point.
So it almost gives you that dilemma of how do we expect this car to perform well when it was created and designed by people that we felt were not good enough for us and ended up binning them off. So that's something we're going to have to watch out for. It's not to say that Renault car is not good, but I just feel like it's going to
struggle in comparison.
Yeah, at the moment I've not seen anything from them that suggests to me that Racing Point and McLaren are going to have them for company immediately, but they'll be in the fight. But I just feel those 2 are in a better position at this point.
Yeah.
And I think that brings us nicely to AlphaTauri. My little B team.
Yeah, you're a bit obsessed with that bloody car, mate.
It's just such a gorgeous livery, mate.
You know what? I wish we had a camera and you could see the faces that Adam Paul's with.
I really don't think that's a good idea.
No, it's making me feel a little bit uncomfortable, to be honest. Don't look at me the way you look at that car, mate, because no would be the answer.
I was thinking of that song from Ali G.
Oh, I know, and I'm not word for word, unfortunately, but I'm not going to do it.
Sing it.
Let me.
I really thought you were going to there. So AlphaTauri, they did 769 laps, 6th most of all. Danny Kvyat and Pierre Gasly were in the midfield, 11th and 14th respectively. Only 1.5 tenths separating them. So late 116.9 for Danny Kvyat and 117.0 for Pierre Gasly. They look strong. They look good. I think this midfield battle is going to be fairly tight though between those 4 teams, even though I do feel that Racing Point and McLaren are going to be leading it. But the battle with Renault, I think AlphaTauri, they're definitely clear of the 3 behind them. And they look good. So there's not really too much to say on that, really. I mean, there's a lot of similarities to the RB15. Franz Tost has sung its praises. It looks a good car. The team have done a good job with it. Everybody looks reliable and quick to some degree in this test, and that must be said. I think considering we've had 2 days less of running than we have in the past, the team's done a really good job overall. And AlphaTauri, they look quick. So I won't say too much on them. There wasn't really anything in particular that I noticed on their car too much.
It's just the paint job you like.
Oh, I love that paint job. It's gorgeous. I mean, it was kind of going to go one way or the other, but I think they did the right thing.
Yeah, it could have been ugly.
So bringing us on to Alfa Romeo, they did 735 laps, which was the 9th most. The fastest lap, strangely, was done by Robert Kubica. And he did this on the final day, and obviously, he did a lot of quick running on their qualifying simulations as well. Did a 1:16.9, which was 12th fastest. Kimi Raikkonen, 1:17.0, and Antonio Giovinazzi, unfortunately, was last of the pack with a 1:19.6. Now, on the surface, that's 2.6 seconds off his teammate, and it doesn't look good, but there was a lot of difficulties with his running, and it wasn't really centric towards performance, so we will give him the benefit of the doubt. We know he's not 2.5 seconds off his teammate.
God, no, I think he's in the wrong sport if he's 2.5 seconds off.
Yeah, he's not quite using the throttle as much as perhaps the others are, but
he's pressing the brake pedal when he's pressing the accelerator.
Left the parking brake on, yeah.
Wait, how do you work this thing?
There's new updates on this Alfa Romeo. I did notice as well. New flaps as well on the front. There's a lot of new flaps. I'm not saying that because it's a funny word. That's what they're called, ladies and gentlemen. That's what they're called. So a new main plane well on the front. New airflow diverters as well on the S duct of the chassis. Looks very, very nice as well. They were also trialling a mini shark fin that we saw in 2019.
Is it a baby shark fin?
I'm not singing that song, and I'm certainly not getting on the floor and doing sit-ups to that.
I just want to get in your head. I hope it's in the head of anybody that's listening.
Baby shark,
oh,
baby shark.
Oh.
You see, like
you're going to hell, mate.
I've started a trend now.
Damn you!
Have you ever tried that sit-ups challenge to that song?
Sit-ups, me? Yeah, I'm laugh, mate.
Okay, moving on. But yeah, so I think the question remains on this little shark fin is, will they revert to the type on that or use the 2020 revision? It's usually to sort of stabilise the airflow to the rear wing. The fact that they're bringing it out when they had the 2020 concept available, it shows that they're not overly confident with that, and it might be affecting rear stability. So the car looks good, and in general, I mean, they all look good to some degree.
I think Williams are coming for them.
One thing I will point out, and I did notice this, and I was looking at the front where the air box is, the S duct. Now, I'm going to put this to you guys, listeners as well, to try and chirp in on this, so do feel free to weigh in. So we talked about the Red Bull one, looks like, we said a beaver's mouth originally, now it looks like Patrick Smart from SpongeBob, smiling when you see SpongeBob. But we're also, I think, anyone remember the Mario games on the old N64? There was the character, the gas mask, not the shy guy, the other one, I think they called him a Snuffit. I'm just showing Courtney a picture.
I was quite a Mario fan, Adam, and I didn't know that. So.
Yeah, it looks a bit like that.
It's very specific.
Don't call it the Snuffit. Or failing that, Darth Vader as well.
Winning that, go a bit more mainstream.
Yeah, exactly. I think everyone knows Darth Vader. It's just hopefully if it starts making sounds like Vader when he's breathing, I'll be a bit worried about that engine.
Then the FIA need to look into that.
As long as
it's been powered by the dark force.
As long as they're not burning any lubricants. Yeah, it was Frank. I find your lack of faith disturbing.
We're such nerds.
Oh no, it's great, isn't it? Brilliant. I think that's what they tune in for. They love it. But yeah, so it's good there. So that moves us on to Williams. 737 laps from Williams. A good effort, I think, overall. They were 8th most laps. A good effort considering the struggles they had in the first test last season. And they were quick as well. George Russell was 10th fastest overall, 1 minute 16.8. Nicholas Latifi, 1 minute 17.3, was 17th. Both show good pace despite the issues. Reliability seems to be the problem for Williams.
Yep.
Similar issues like the Mercedes power units they had. Hopefully they can get that sorted. But they look good in parts, definitely competitive. They're definitely not going to be stragglers this season. I think that's safe to say that they're going to be in the running, they're going to be in the fight this year, which is what we want to see.
Please, because George Russell, I mentioned it in last episode, George Russell is so much better than...
I mean, yeah, the Aquafresh car, as we're calling it this season, it looks good.
Maybe it was
quick.
the refresh that Williams needed.
Maybe. Oh, I like it. Oh, that's cringe though, but I like it nonetheless.
I felt it when I said
I
it.
know, it was like,
I felt it inside. It didn't feel right.
But they brought some updates to this test. They had a revised front wing. They modified it. So, as you can see on the image, the third and fourth flaps coming down.
That's a lot of flaps.
There's a lot of flaps. They're split into two parts, and this is similar to what Mercedes are doing on their car. So, should improve airflow in that area. They also got a new engine cover. New engine cover, I should say. Cover.
There you go.
The new engine cover, very similar to 2019. McLaren and Alfa Romeo, so got the mini shark fin as well on the back of that, pointed out by the lines on there. So there's obviously some of the teams in the first test were running the full shark fin there, and they obviously don't feel quite confident that it's really working for them in terms of the channeling the airflow to the rear. So obviously feel they can get more out of a mini one or trialing that, see what works. It'll be interesting to see what they use in Melbourne. But overall, I think Williams, they should be very happy with what they've done the test. It's a team that's come a long way. They've had their struggles. Hopefully for them, they'll be able to continue to be competitive and climb up the order.
For the sake of the sport as well, because younger listeners won't realise how if they not aware of the history of Williams, they were winning championships on a regular basis in the 80s and 90s, weren't they?
Yeah, very prominent at the front of Formula One, and it's good to see that they're making progress. Hopefully they can carry that momentum on. It depends on how much they decide to develop this car. Remember the 2021 regulations, this is going to hamper a lot of teams. It's a case of who blinks first almost. But after the work that Williams have done, they're not going to want to be in a position where they'll end up struggling and starting a new set of regulations on the back foot. Hopefully that doesn't come to it, but we'll be monitoring their progress closely. So well done to Williams and the people that work there. Great facilities, great staff, great drivers, and hopefully they'll have a good year this year. So that brings us to our final team, and we do bear this has run on quite a bit, so I'm going to try and be quick on this one. If there's one team in testing that really needed a good second week, it was Haas. Unfortunately, that didn't really pan out. They did the fewest laps of everybody, 649, which was the least of anyone. Kevin Magnussen did only 250. Now, before that would have been good, but only Robert Kubica did fewer, and he only ran for about 2 mornings.
Wow.
Lap times in that sort of ballpark, 1:17.0 for Romain Grosjean, 13th. Kevin Magnussen, 1:17.4, was 18th fastest. The car, Haas have struggled in recent years, and I think it's a team that 3 years ago, they were looking the 4th best team, the best of the rest outside the front 3. Slowly but surely, as time's gone on, they've fallen further down the pack. They tend to start the season strong, and then they tend to sort of wither away as the season goes on and fade from that battle. I'm worried that their starting position is not going to be good. And because of that, this could have a big impact on their future moving forward. Now, Gene Haas has put a lot of money, who also runs the Haas franchise in American racing sports, like NASCAR in particular. And he's been on record in saying that there are considerations towards whether or not they feel that Haas is going to continue in Formula 1 post-2020. They don't have an agreement yet to stay on. So a lot of people's futures are at risk. As much as we enjoy seeing the Haas team, and in particular Gunther Steiner, as his antics on the new Drive to Survive series on Netflix. So if you haven't seen that, do check that out, because it is quite good to watch. They're on form. Gunther is on form.
I haven't watched it yet.
You haven't watched it? I definitely recommend it. I think I'm halfway through the series so far. I'm probably going to binge watch the rest of it for the rest of the week. But no, it's good. It's good. But Haas, they had some reliability issues in the first test. The accident with Magnussen and Grosjean's crash as well. The car just doesn't seem to be there at the moment. The drivers don't seem to have a lot of confidence. It's a team at the moment that sort of scratching their heads and wondering what they've got to do to keep up, not only just keep up with the pack, but to try and find gains, because no one's standing still.
Don't have much faith in the driver lineup either in comparison. I think they have the weakest driver lineup.
Yeah, I think Grosjean and Magnussen at times have shown good pace, but equally they've been so inconsistent and caused frustrations to their own team, where they're not only crashed or had problems, but they've also collided with each other. And I think the telling point in the series, Drive to Survive, is that there was always that theme that the drivers were kind of there for themselves and not really thinking of the team. And in Formula One, that's a very dangerous attitude to have. I mean, it's not like football or other individual sports where you can kind of go do your own thing, be successful, and the team will succeed if you succeed. In Formula One, there is an element to that, but
there's risk.
With so much involvement. One driver on their own can't win a race with a rubbish car, and a rubbish driver can't win a race with a very good car. It's a team effort. And I'll be honest with you, as much as I have the utmost respect for these guys, I think this is the team where I feel the connectivity and the harmony and the relationship between the drivers and the team is at the most has the most friction. Is the most difficult.
Now, I know we've already discussed them, but do you think if you have a look at McLaren, the contrast, you see how well Sainz and Norris get on. It's no coincidence that the way that team has gone forward in the past season.
Yeah, and I think that kind of coincides with success of a team, where if a team's doing really well and they want to be pushing for bigger honours, then you start to see the drivers really going up against each other to try and assert dominance. I think in some cases like McLaren, it was easier for Sainz and Norris, who were both rookies in that team.
Yeah.
And Sainz had just come out of a partnership with Renault, where he lost his seat to Daniel Ricciardo, trying to find a new team to establish himself and obviously not rock the boat. Lando Norris was a product of the McLaren Young Drivers Programme, a very successful one as well. And with his attitude and his nature, he seems like a very easy person to get on with. But obviously this year I'm expecting them to be a lot more fiery and battle for dominance.
Yes, yeah, it's going to be a big season for them.
There was always that battle in qualifying that Lando won, even though Carlos was the highest point scorer for different reasons. But in Haas's case, there are issues with that car that the team are not having the best time getting on top with. Gunther Steiner has come out and said that I think the reliability of everyone is good. Respectively speaking, I think if you looked at their performance compared to everyone else, over 6 days they're averaging over 100 laps, which isn't bad. I mean, these cars are practically bulletproof almost, and the reliability is so good that it's amazing that we look back now and think that 100 laps in testing is not sufficient on a day.
I remember it being a big deal.
Before, 100 days in testing would be considered a huge achievement as much as 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
It's almost like if you don't do 100 laps, you're struggling. So yeah, I'm worried for Haas, but it's early days. We don't know the true pecking order. Speaking of which, as I say, thank you for bearing with us on this one. So we've got for everyone, we've got food testing. We guarantee the episodes are not going to be as long as this in the future.
Another good job, well done.
Yeah, we got there in the end. Thank you for bearing with us. And if this is like the third part that you're tuning into,
we can make this a third part. Absolutely.
What we can do, I was kind of thinking if the listeners are probably just going to tune in and tune out and like listen to it like perhaps tomorrow or whenever I upload this, and then they'll come back.
This is your opportunity.
Oh well, there we go. But we'll see. So we're going to be moving on now to the next segment in the podcast, and we're going to be discussing our predictions for the season. So, Courtney, I'm going to put the question to you first.
Fire away.
So I'm going to fire off some questions, and I will see.
I hope it's questions.
Question. Drink.
Oh yeah.
That's good stuff. Okay.
I'm crying.
I'm going to leave that in. I'm not editing that out. Just let everyone sitting there waiting and thinking, okay, get on with it.
By the way, I don't actually know what you're going to ask, so you're going to catch me off guard.
This is why these episodes are like an hour or so long, because
it's true.
Like 50 minutes of it is us talking crap.
We're just having normal conversations, and you know.
This should just be a standard podcast, and then occasionally we talk about Formula One.
Why not, eh? Why not?
We're going to call this the average. No, that's probably been taken. Anyway, moving on. So you've probably skipped to this part anyway, guys. I don't blame you if you have. So, calling the fire off some questions. So,
go away. Go.
Who do you think is going to be world champion this year?
There's going to be massive bias here, but Lewis Hamilton.
Lewis Hamilton, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Who do you think is going to be constructors champion?
Mercedes.
Mercedes, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, fair enough. Okay. Surprise of the season. Good or bad?
So, do you want me to do good or bad, or good and bad?
Ooh, I'm going to throw a curveball at you and do both.
Alright then.
And feel free to explain your reasoning.
Well, I think this is, this could be a big season for Lando Norris. If he has the, the reliability compared to last season, he could well be challenging Sainz on a, much more regular basis. So I expect a lot from Norris this season. In terms of bad, I'm just looking at those guys at Haas. You know, I think particularly Grosjean. I feel he could be the one that could struggle this season.
You know, I did say surprise. that seems like a lot of people are probably going to be going for that. But no, fair enough.
You asked a question. Well, you asked questions and I answered.
All right. Okay.
Sorry, do you want me to go? Do you want me to go
No.
Fernando Alonso, even though he's not in Formula 1 anymore?
Well, unpopular opinion then. So this is going to be a new one. We'll do the unpopular opinion.
Alright then. Unpopular opinion.
Go on then.
Oh. I think Sebastian Vettel is going to be the world champion.
You want beef, didn't you?
We want to throw hands.
You want beef? No, okay, fair enough. Alright then, so,
what do you reckon's going to be your prediction for,
I thought you'd never ask. Okay, so... yeah.
Go on, your turn.
Alright, okay. So, I think my world champion, I'm going to go a different way to you on this one. I am going to go with Max Verstappen to win the world championship. I feel that...
You have been saying he should be consistent.
Yeah, I think the Red Bull looks very impressive, and I've said for a while now that I feel Max is definitely ready for a title challenge. It just seems that he always seems to have a car capable in his hands when the season's practically done. So if Red Bull start the season strong and go on with the development curve that we know that only they seem to be capable of, I do genuinely believe that this could be Max's year. It'll be the last year that he has a chance to be the youngest world champion. And Charles Leclerc as well has that opportunity too, we must add that in, to beat Vettel's record of being the youngest world champion. I feel this could be Max's year. I really do. He's mature beyond his years in some regards. Still has some way to go in that, but if he has the right car, definitely has a chance.
So, do you reckon Red Bull will be Constructors' Champions?
No. I think that's going to be Mercedes. And I say this with the greatest respect to Alex Albon, but I feel like Red Bull has become a team that's very much backing their main man in Max. More than most teams have. I think more than you can argue Mercedes had when Bottas first signed for them. In regard where people were saying that it's Hamilton's team. I genuinely feel that this is a team that is very much centred around Max, and they will do everything possible, like others have done in the past.
It works.
It does work when you have one guy to back. I mean, Ferrari were famous under Michael Schumacher.
Exactly.
It worked really well. They did it under Fernando Alonso as well, which worked for them. McLaren, in the old days with Hakkinen and Coulthard, even though Coulthard was very good and had that championship charge in 2003, Hakkinen was always the main man in that team. So it does work, but I feel like more so than probably almost any team on the grid, I just don't feel that Albon, as quick as he is going to be as consistently in. Having said that, if he has the car underneath him, there's no reason why he can't challenge for podiums on a regular basis, considering where Ferrari might be. So I'm going to say Mercedes. I think Bottas is going to be good this year again, and he's got to fight for his seat.
He's massive for,
and that will motivate him to. It's going to be a different Bottas again, Bottas 3.0 if you like, but no, it should be good.
So, the good and the bad. What do you think?
So I think the good surprise this year is going to be, well, I don't want to say Racing Point because we kind of know or have a good idea that they're going to be quick. So I won't go with that way. Actually, no, you know what I will? I think a good surprise is I think Racing Point are going to score a podium on merit.
Whoa, okay.
I think they've got the pace to really challenge for one, more than perhaps other midfield teams have done in the past. But when I say on merit, I mean that certain scenarios in the race, like a safety car or weather or crashes and that, don't necessarily happen, and we have a bland, boring race. And I feel Racing Point, perhaps Sergio Perez, who's been a podium scorer before for Force India it was at the time, I think he will get a podium this season.
Wow.
I don't want to go as far as a race win, but I think a podium will definitely
It'd have to be early. I think it'd have to be early.
Yeah, I think the earlier the better. The better chance for them. Maybe Melbourne. Maybe. Oh, actually, yeah. Why not? Surprise.
Maybe in Bahrain, he'd be the only one that shows up.
No, we'll get there. Yeah, we'll be driving around with a big face mask over his helmet.
There you go.
On his face.
So, who do you reckon's going to be your bad prediction?
I think Ferrari are going to be the bad surprise. I'm a Ferrari fan. I genuinely believe that Ferrari I feel that they've got more pace in them.
You got sandbags going on in your head, mate.
I think that those sandbags, they left them in Marilena and they were hoping they had anvils to tie to that car. I just, from what I've seen from Ferrari, I know your cautious optimism because you believe...
I can't buy it. I don't buy it.
We could be wrong. I mean, Barcelona does tend to highlight the flaws of a car more than other tracks.
You know something. You've been doing all your figures and stuff, and you've got something hidden. You're trying to troll me.
It's all in the pad.
So you can come back to me in a few weeks' time and go, oh, I wasn't to know.
Oh, I might just delete this part of the episode, so we'll never know. Into the Twilight Zone.
That would be massive if you're right. That'd be massive.
I do think Ferrari's going to be a disappointment, and I feel that this season they are going, and I hope I'm wrong, but I feel like it's going to be after a couple of races, maybe get as far as the Spanish Grand Prix after usually the teams roll out their big updates in Spain. And I think Ferrari may have a review of their performance relative to the rest of the field or their competitors like Mercedes and Red Bull and possibly others behind them. More unlikely, but you never know. And they may decide they're going to divert all their resources into 2021. I know Ferrari have put loads and loads and loads of resources, more money than anyone else, to try and finally win another World Championship. They're first since 2007. First constructors since 2008.
13 years.
It's a long time in Formula One. It's almost unheard of.
I've got that maths right.
Very good, very good. Yeah, but I just think that this is a likely scenario in that they will go towards developing the 2021 package like Mercedes did. And that worked so well for them. They've won every championship in this hybrid era, so perhaps Ferrari have that in mind. I think they'd be naive not to. And I don't think it'd be bad. It's just the media backlash if they do go that route. Are they bold enough? Is Mattia Binotto brave enough and secure enough in his job to take that risk? I don't know. But we'll see. What was the other one? So unpopular opinion, I think it was?
Yes, unpopular.
Unpopular opinion. You really got to push the boat on this one, trying to be on the risk of controversial, more for clout than anything else. There, we got that once in today.
There you go. So this is for the YouTube.
Yeah, this is for the views, ladies and gentlemen. Who are we? We have an amateur boxing fight as well. Probably won't draw much of a crowd. We'll do it in your call. Oh, actually, not even probably.
Millwall Park.
Yeah, Millwall Park. Is that who you want, Sam? Give the Woolston Raider, see if he'd have a go. I wouldn't fight him.
Know.
I wouldn't fight him. No.
No, I reckon he'd bite my ankles.
No, I love that guy. He's great. Unpopular opinion. I think. Unpopular opinion. Oh, this is hard. I'm trying to think of a really controversial one. I think unpopular opinion this season.
Jesus is going to win?
No. I mean, I've seen stranger things in Formula One. So unpopular opinion. I think if he doesn't perform well, I think Valtteri Bottas is going to be replaced next season. Possibly. I do feel that the regulation changes may prompt if he doesn't perform well, because there have been times last season where he's been good, but then equally there have been times where he's been quite underwhelming. And I think because it doesn't cause too much friction, and Mercedes have been very successful despite that in Lewis Hamilton and winning constructors' titles, they may decide that they may try to seek an opportunity to sign a driver for the long term. Perhaps like a George Russell.
George Russell would make sense.
Or maybe an Ocon or even a Daniel Ricciardo. Those options are available.
Yeah.
Ricciardo is keeping his ear to the ground. He has mentioned that he's willing to talk to other teams, and I don't think Renault is going to be able to keep him from going somewhere like Mercedes if they come calling.
No chance.
So yeah, I'm going to say Bottas I think could be replaced next season.
Time will tell.
So coming to the last part of this, not the subject that we really felt that we would be talking about, but given the impact that it's had on the world and the current state from the World Health Organization.
We put out a little poll, didn't we?
We did ask you guys if you felt it was you want us to talk about this, and you voted unanimously that you do. So
it was mainly sex bots that voted though.
Oh really? Well, we managed to afford those.
It was a very open poll.
Oh, brilliant. You are like next level wrong, and you really are. Like that's just
Well,
so getting back to that. So for those of you well, I say for those of you unaware, everyone's probably aware of this at the moment. So the sudden outbreak and spread of the coronavirus has caused quite a lot of talk in the news. And if you remember from our first episode, we mentioned that the Chinese Grand Prix was postponed as a result of the widespread of the virus in China, and that they couldn't guarantee the prevention of this being spread out to people that travelled to the race, and obviously personnel involved in Formula One. Now, the viruses continue to spread, and in certain multiple areas, most notably Japan and Italy, northern Italy as well, quite a lot of cases there. And because of that, there's been concerns over some of the teams and being able to travel to certain places. Now, the reason why this is significant, the first part of the season is in the Oceania, Asia area, so places like Australia, Bahrain, and Vietnam. Those would be the first 3 races in that order. Obviously, China would have been included, but that's now been postponed.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely, China was in that cohort. So the concern is, coming up to Australia, is will we be having a Grand Prix in Australia? Will we be having a Grand Prix in Bahrain and in Vietnam? There have been talks where there is the possibility where the season could be postponed to as late as April and start the season in Zandvoort in Holland with the first European race. And there's been a lot of concern. I remember watching and testing, they interviewed Chase Carey at Liberty Media, and he said it's an evolving situation. Things are changing all the time, and we have to be...
It's changing on almost a daily basis,
It's almost hourly. Like, literally, you get the information is updated on government websites, I think in the UK, every day at 2 p.m. to get the latest information.
Whoa.
It's as often as that every day where these teams are updating the latest information and health and safety to put the public on this. And in Formula One, this is also apparent. In other sports, in football, for example, we've had games being played behind closed doors, games being postponed as a result of this. And it's going to have a big impact, particularly in the summer. At the moment, the current situation, from what we've been hearing in Australia, is that the race is going ahead as planned.
Yep, has been given the go-ahead.
Now, the big controversy and the big concern with that is there was meant to be a MotoGP race in Qatar taking place very soon. And unfortunately, Qatar had imposed a immediate quarantine for people travelling into the country for 2 weeks to protect the virus from spreading in their country. Now, for those of you that have flown to places like Australia, for example...
I do that on a regular, mate.
You do that. You've got it on a loyalty card. You get your air miles in.
Yeah.
People have been travelling to Australia, transit, and stopping off at places like Qatar and Singapore, and Abu Dhabi as well. And because of this, it means that a lot of the F1 teams, well, almost all of them, are going to have this issue where if they're from certain areas like Italy and Japan, for example... And I use those two in particular for a reason, and I'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. I know
you're almost put into a period where you have to be quarantined, and if you're quarantined for 2 weeks from this point, you're not going to make the Grand Prix, because that's in less than 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
Now, in the MotoGP, there were reassurances from officials that there were going to be measures put in place where they do health checks on the spot so people wouldn't be quarantined, and personnel would not be prevented from getting there from those areas. Unfortunately, that has not happened. And that's not been followed through, meaning that they've had to cancel and postpone that race in Qatar. Now, this has obviously created concern for teams like Ferrari, for example, who have had issues with some of the staff and some people where they've had to restrict the number of people that have been able to go to their base in Maranello and who that can travel because of this. It's spread quite widely in northern Italy as well, amongst other areas, and Japan as well, where they've had issues, and that's going to affect people like Honda and people like at Red Bull that work there, and it's also going to affect teams like AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo and Haas, who have representatives from that Ferrari technical group that are based in Italy.
Nothing's going well for Ferrari yet, is it?
No, the season hasn't even started, and all of a sudden it's just bad news. It's almost like...
It's like being a West Ham fan.
Well, I'm an Arsenal fan, so things aren't exactly great for us either.
That's true. God, it ain't really going well for you, is it, at the moment, mate?
But, so yeah, it's a huge impact at the moment. The statement from Ferrari that we saw today, though, is just, and they said it like this, it was on a Sky Sports Italia, And they said, despite knowing that the situation is constantly evolving, on the front of the departure for Australia and Bahrain, there are currently no contraindications, and bear in mind this is translated, so forgive me if I've mispronounced it, from any of the entities. Therefore, at the moment, our departure is confirmed. In Bahrain, an update from ministries there, they have activated a number of public health measures, and it is in the context of these initiatives that the Bahrain International Circuit is confident its preparations will result in a successful and safe Grand Prix later this month. Now, I suppose the significance of that is Bahrain's international circuit, unlike Australia, is not exactly one where it's full to the rafters with crowds.
Very true.
There's been a lot of controversy in the past over protests and people in that region feeling they're priced out, and it's more of a track that's suited to appease tourists that go there. It's a good track to go to, from what I've heard. And from what I've seen in the past, it looks like a good track to go to, but it's definitely not one that's appeasing the locals. And
it's like if it was in Brazil, for example, that would be
different
a big
story.
issue.
Different story. So in a way, being able to mitigate the spread of the virus and protect the health and safety of the personnel from the teams going there, as paramount as that is, it's much easier to achieve than somewhere like Australia, or even somewhere like Vietnam, perhaps, as well. And that's under threat. Chase Carey has said that he's confident the race will go ahead in Vietnam as well, despite the concerns following the postponement in the race, and preparations are going according to plan. So, but this situation is changing every day,
like
and it's something
all the time it's changing. Like there'll be times where I think, okay, there aren't that many cases, it'll be under control, and then all of a sudden it'll just come up, there's another 20 cases.
Absolutely,
confirmed.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
So despite us giving you this information on Monday evening, I mean, by the time this episode comes out, in possibly a couple of days,
I hope we try to get it out tomorrow morning, we'll see.
But even by then, you never know, everything we've just said may not be true anymore, because that is the rate in which things are developing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a developing situation, and I expect this is going to affect a lot of sports, not just Formula One. But obviously,
it's going to happen in football, isn't it, as well?
It's already happening in certain areas.
Yeah,
and
in the UK.
I mean, I saw an article the other day where, I think it was Autosport actually, and they talked about the hypothetical possibility of forgetting the 2020 season.
Don't.
It's in favour of letting the teams develop the 2021 cars so we can have a great 2021 season. But this didn't factor in a situation like this with the coronavirus. We sit in here drinking a couple of bottles.
I think it's also, I don't know if it was picked up on the mic, but we had an ambulance going past.
I apologise for the background noise.
It's very fitting.
Yeah, we're right next to a main road where we're filming it. We're recording this, sorry. It's a growing concern. Yeah. And right now, the only thing I suppose that we can do is just keep an eye on the news, keep an eye on the updates, follow the advice from the World Health Organisation and your respective health centres, and...
Can I use this as an opportunity to give some advice on the matter?
Yeah, by all means, it's an open... Well, say open mic. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the first piece of advice would be to wash your hands all the time, on a regular basis. When in doubt, wash your hands.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible piece of advice, and I feel like if you can, be mindful of surfaces that you touch, because the what we've seen, the bacteria and the virus can survive potentially for a couple of hours, and obviously the last thing you want to be doing is touching surfaces and then touching your face or your mouth or your nose and all that stuff. But yeah,
second, I'll say second of all, be mindful to those around you, particularly weak or elderly friends and family.
Yeah,
that's another thing, because of the rate in which this could spread. You need to be very careful.
So yeah, no, I think that's a good point. We have to be mindful of others in this situation, and we do owe it to ourselves and owe it to those around us to be mindful, to make sure that we can, maintain good hygiene, and also if you do feel sick and you do feel under the weather,
don't go to work.
Yeah, seriously, we do joke about a lot on this podcast, and it's something where we like to have a laugh and a bit of fun, but in this case, we do want to be a bit serious for a moment. It is important, if you do feel under the weather or unwell and you're considering whether or not you should go to work, it's best to not go to work. If you're in the UK, don't go to work. Call your boss, say, look, I'm feeling under the weather, I'm feeling poorly, I think it's sensible for me to self-quarantine myself for a little bit, and call 111 on the NHS hotline. Don't call 999, don't go to your GP, don't go to A&E.
Don't we stress
this because you're going to potentially infect other people. If you, not just saying if you're positive, but you don't want to spread this, call 111 and follow their instructions. They're great people at the NHS, and they'll be able to provide you with the best possible care.
Can't believe it. We've gone from Formula 1 to becoming a...
We promote some great causes. We really do. I know we joke and take the mick and all that other stuff, and that's kind of our thing. And I'd like to think that you guys get that vibe with us as well, even though we've been going on for an hour and a half now. And I apologise. This is going to be the last of the long episodes. Testing's done. We've got a season, hopefully, to look forward to. Touch wood. I think this is probably a good opportunity now to sign this off, really, I think.
Yeah.
And so now 2 weeks to the start of the season. Hopefully, touch wood, that we do have a race going ahead as normal. That the plan seems to be that's where we're going with this, which is great. Hopefully, the situation will improve. And I don't know about you, mate, but I am absolutely excited to see what the season has got in store for us.
There's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, we need to see what the pecking order is going to be. At this point, we really don't know. Obviously, we have a rough idea where everyone's going to be.
So sum it up. So we've been speaking for over an hour and we still haven't come to a conclusion.
No, I don't think anybody has.
No.
This testing period, pre-season, it's been the toughest to predict, I think, in recent years. I know most of us went completely the wrong direction last year, thinking Ferrari were going to walk it, and they didn't. They looked like they were walking, but they didn't dominate at all. And this season's been so difficult to predict.
And
it's exciting. Yes. But I wasn't expecting anything at all. I messed up that line. Damn it! I'm sorry, Jim Carrey. I messed up. Clearly, this is why I'm not an actor. Anyway, I think we will end this episode there. Do join us for next week, where we will be previewing the Australian Grand Prix and adding a few of our other antics as well.
Sure we
Do
will.
remember to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. The handle is @DNF1_podcast. I've got it right again. For both Twitter and Instagram. We also have a YouTube channel as well where you can watch this podcast on DNF1 Podcast.
I'm looking forward to your added feature on the YouTube channel now, Adam.
What's that?
The photos.
Oh, the photos. Oh, well, they're going to be up there.
We're going to the next level. Well, Adam certainly
We're
is.
taking baby steps in this. We're
Exactly.
working it out. Actually, I will plug one more thing actually on this. So, for those of you who don't know, I also do a little bit of commentating on an online esports league. It's based on PlayStation 4, so you Xbox users, you can watch it on YouTube. So we're not exclusive. So you guys can tune in too.
We don't discriminate on this channel.
Definitely not, even though you chose the wrong console. But by the by, next gen consoles coming out later this year. Well, that's the plan. We don't know what's going to happen.
I'll get the PS5 if it has Crash Bandicoot on it.
Well, they'd probably be able to, play
like a real life Crash.
Like you on the Formula 1 games, isn't it?
Yay!
Hey, Mario Kart. So talking about those leagues, so it's called Vision Racing League, otherwise known as VRL. You can check them out on Twitter as VRL_PS4. You can also check them out on Instagram as Vision Racing League. It's an online league played on F1 2019. And it's some really great racing. I commentate on their Division 2 league, and I've also done a bit of work on their Division 1 league as well. So do give them a follow, check them out.
Do it.
Great content. I tasked you guys to check them out and watch a race. We've got a race coming up this weekend. 2 races actually. The Belgian Grand Prix.
Oh, good track.
So it's going to be good tracks. Round 5 of VRL F2 and round... I'm going to say 8. Yes, round 8 of VRL F1 as well. Some really great racing. And on that note, I think it's time for us to say goodbye once and for all. Thank you very much for sticking with us. Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Stay healthy. And we will see you on the next DNF1 podcast.
See you soon.
See you later.